this is what you've been waiting for. Out popped one or two letters, the name, Artemisia. We found the signature.
The eureka moment.
This makes it absolutely clear that it is by her.
It's completely bulletproof.
You can just see the brushstrokes there.
The realism of it is fantastic. I get goosebumps thinking about it, right? What she went through.
We did a tiny little test on this picture, and suddenly history started pouring out.
Well, my name is Scott Devon. I'm an art collector and chair of the North Wales Foundation. I'm also the host of Beneath the Varnish, uncovering stories, secrets, and voices that shape the art world.
Afternoon.
Hello, Dan.
Nice to finally meet you, Simon.
Again. Welcome. Well, come through.
Go in.
Here we are.
Did you have a good flight?
I couldn't sleep. I was so excited to see the painting. So
We've got some tissues here somewhere as well.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, here we go. This is what you've been waiting for.
Oh my,
Isn't that great?
that is breathtaking. I'm drawn to the Goliath head. You know, seeing the Goliath head is definitely a striking point of the picture. You know, most pictures, I think, you read a book, you go left to right or left to down, but I immediately am drawn to here.
Yeah.
The blood and guts.
The blood and guts, the gory parts.
Yeah.
You have to step back to gather the entire painting, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's a remarkable.
It's a remarkable piece of painting, isn't it?
And it's life size
Yeah.
as well. Can you tell me a little bit about how the condition was before you worked on the painting, Simon?
Well, it had been cleaned back in the middle of the 20th century,
Okay.
but it had not been cleaned thoroughly. So a lot of the dark areas had very, very old discolored varnish. You really couldn't see into some of the areas like this. And the sky had been painted over because sky is blue. And so somebody had painted blue over the sky. It would have been blue to begin with in the top left-hand corner, but it's discolored. It's old. It's that sort of paint. It does discolor. And it becomes transparent with age as well. But, you know, we all age, so the painting has aged, and it's part of its history.
And then obviously, speaking of history, the sword that she actually signed was discovered here.
Yes, yeah. So that was covered in dirty varnish and overpaint as well. And so when we were very gently removing all of the old varnish and all the old dirt, out popped one or two letters, and it was exhilarating to then uncover the name, Artemisia.
Artemisia, and then 1/6, and then without the final date, but we think 1630s.
Well, you can see that we've tried with so many different filters in our computer to try and also with infrared and with ultraviolet and different colors to try and read what the last two numbers are. But we can't make head or tail of it. So going back into the history of the picture, there's another version of David and Goliath, which was seen in her studio in 1631. But that one is most definitely a copy of this one. So the latest it would have been painted would have been 1631 and may well have been painted a few years before. And the reason why I say this is the prime one is because she has used a technique which Caravaggio used, and that's scratching into the wet preparation. And you can see that with the raking light here. Very definite scratches here, which outline the design.
And even in here, it looks like she redid some of the proportion of the arm.
Well, this is precisely, in fact, where there is actually a change of mind. The arm was about an inch broader. You can just see the brushstrokes there. And also the arm came down here later on as well, but that's been changed. This has been brought up.
And then tell me a little bit about, this just looks beautiful,
Yeah.
almost Caravaggio-esque. Can you explain a little bit of how that?
It's lead white, so it would have been, it's very, very hard, and it's withstood the time of people badly treating it and trying to overclean it. So it's actually more or less as it was when it was painted. It's very typical of her way of painting. It's one of her sort of signature ways of painting, these tiny little pleats that she was so good at, and making volume in the linen and the diaphanous material. This is absolutely typical.
It's actually looks real, more three-dimensional.
Yeah. Yes.
She started off with the folds coming this way, and she's changed them all this way. It's all symbolic of a painting in transition that's being painted for the first time.
Yes, yes. And so the other one, I took a tracing of it, and I took it to Vienna, and I laid it on top of the other one. The body of it was exactly the same, except that his head is up there, and he is holding it very proudly up there. So it's less in your face down here.
And it's become less of a proud, triumphant David and more of a reflective David.
Yeah. Well, can you imagine being a small shepherd boy coming up against this monster with a great big 6-foot sword?
I certainly can.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I think it sounds
the
fun.
feeling.
I do. But it's interesting that obviously it reflects her life.
Yeah.
I think anybody that knows much about Gentileschi looks at the story of David and Goliath and thinks this is a perfect fit for the artist's life.
And also, on top of all of that, the subject matter of Goliath, that is very much like a facial resemblance of Tassi,
Yes.
who raped Artemisia.
Yes.
So she got her revenge and her justice.
There you are.
And then obviously, like Daniel mentioned, the expression, this is post-battle. You can see obviously some of the non-idealistic after the fact of the dirt and the mud of battle and the realism of it.
The gorish
reality is
fantastic.
Is just powerful. And then obviously you mentioned his facial expression. He's not one of a jubilant. It's not arrogant. It's mature, stoic.
Acceptance.
It's reflective.
Yeah.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
And it does have some resemblance of Artemisia,
Which is
in the facial.
she uses her mask quite often. Yeah.
And I believe her daughters, though this is probably predates her daughter being used extensively as a model, but I think there's one of her paintings of the allegory of the arts that, for me, looks to me as though there's her daughter's face as being used as the model.
It was quite similar to hers, isn't it?
Very similar, slightly sort of wider.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's almost an androgyny here.
Correct.
Which fits with the artist's life and fits with the artist's canon.
Yeah, very autobiographical of her life.
Yeah, she is.
Well, this is
a great painter
fascinating.
of women.
Let's sit down and discuss a
thank
little
you.
bit more. Thank you very much, Simon. I'd like to welcome everyone today to the episode on Artemisia and the painting that we were discussing, the David and Goliath, that was at auction at Sotheby's in June of 2025 this year. With me today is a really good friend of mine, Daniel Hunt. He is the owner of Sloane Street Auctions. And welcome to the podcast. Daniel, could you talk a little bit about Sloane Street?
Sloane Street Auctions, we started it 3 or 4 years ago, and it's just taken right off. There's a huge gap in the market for what we do, which is old masters and great things under sort of 50, 100,000. And there's great appetite for that at Sloane Street Auctions.
It's
So
always a pleasure going there because there's always something, and there's always something for everybody.
That's true. Yeah. Huge mix sales. So this we've got Fabergé, we've got Old Masters, we've got Modigliani. There's the things that come in from Mayfair, from Belgravia to Chelsea, where we are based, are just extraordinary, really. England is still a fine hunting ground for brilliant things.
Daniel has been also very helpful in my personal collection and been my key advisor. So welcome to the show, Daniel.
Thanks.
And obviously today we have the world-renowned Simon Gillespie, art restorer, and maybe Simon can tell us a little bit about his background.
I've been restoring paintings for 40 plus years. And
That's a big plus.
It's a big plus, I know. We have a wonderful team here, which you can see some of them working behind here, who cover everything from 600 years ago to modern, contemporary, as we call them, wet paintings. They're still fresh from the artist. I love getting up in the morning, rolling out of bed. What am I going to do today? Is it a Rembrandt or is it a Modigliani?
Is there a difference on how you restore like an older painting versus a modern painting?
Most definitely,
Yeah.
You have to be very brave to restore modern paintings. They are built with quite unusual materials.
And inferior materials a lot of the time in terms of their longevity. Right?
But just, why would an artist choose to use chocolate to paint it? How long is that going to last? Especially after lunch,
Or other matters like Serrano or...
Yeah. It's a competition really to get it right sometimes. But no, luckily we've got some chemists and scientists.
How many pieces of art do you work on at once at the studio?
Gosh, there are maybe 100 things here, but we're working on generally turning things around. So each person, we might have 3 or 4 things each. More and more modern contemporary things need our attention. Generally because they get bigger and they get handled very badly. So,
can you tell us a little bit about like when you first saw the painting and what the work that you accomplished for it?
Well, the painting had been misattributed a number of times. It came up for auction. And then back in the 1970s, it was thought to be by Guerrieri. Gianni Papi, who wrote this article, actually saw this black and white photograph and then attributed it from that, which is a brave thing to do. When it arrived to us, it was not very dirty. It had been cleaned in the 20th century. But it had been treated very badly because it had been overpainted. So, for instance, the sky, which is slightly discolored, a normal aging process of some paint, had been painted over with a Dulux blue. It was horrible. So we managed to take all that off and actually clean the rest of the painting so that it is now a well-balanced image. And we brought out the most obvious things that this artist, Artemisia, does, like the white in the sleeve, the way she paints white linen like that is just very typical of her. And there are other small little things, little openings between the limbs gives that three-dimensional aspect to the body, which makes it much more interesting than just a straightforward standing portrait. And then some people started saying, well, is this Artemisia? And then, during the cleaning, we found the signature.
The eureka moment.
Yeah, and it was marvelous. You know, one or two little of the letters came out, and we started gathering around.
Oh, wow.
And then suddenly it was art. Well, of course it's art. And then it was Artemisia, and then we found the date.
Yeah, without the signature, which she didn't sign many of her paintings, but she did sign this one symbolically on the sword as well.
Yeah.
But without that signature, it would probably still be debatable if it was attributed to her, right?
I think most, as you know, Dan, most of the great artists, there's always a team of people who will say yes, and there's always going to be some outsiders that are going to question it. But this makes it absolutely clear that it is by her.
It's completely bulletproof.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And actually the joy of the signature being on the sword.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is so telling in the narrative of Gentileschi's life.
Obviously, the most notable thing is her rape by Agostino Tassi.
Yeah, we focus on that. A lot of us do, because it's so fucking awful, frankly.
Correct.
It's like an awful event, and then she's dragged through the coals.
It's so well documented as well.
Yeah, because she takes them to court. There are court records, they still exist.
The action in the courtroom was quite extraordinary as well, because she was put through torture.
Yeah, physical torture.
Physical torture, yes. Her fingers nearly crushed. Yeah, so thumb screws were put onto her fingers.
Yeah, and
to make her tell the truth, and she didn't break from her story.
Yeah, and symbolic, an artist, obviously, the hands are the most important tool.
Yeah.
And for her to go through that and not break and say, it's true, it's true, it's true,
Yeah.
you know, was just some, I get goosebumps thinking about it right now, of what she went through.
So this evidence that's written down in the court case is symbolic also of what goes on later on in her life as well. Strong personality, wanting to succeed in a man's world as well.
Strong Roman woman.
Yeah.
She lost her mother at 12 years old, so she was, you know, and that actually made her part of the workshop of her father, who was a famous painter as well, that taught her. But you know,
I think she only had brothers. Is that right?
She had,
so it's literally her
brothers,
dad, her brothers. They're all in the workshop. I mean, you know, she would have been having to work twice as hard as the brothers just to make the grade. But my God, she made the grade.
She did, and I remember Orazio, her father, saying that she had the gift as a prodigy, as a young woman or young girl, that showed talent over her brothers, you know, which again was unheard of at that time.
Yeah.
Female painters had the barrier of not being recognized or even thought of or even encouraged to be an artist and a painter.
Well, the good thing is she had a dad who was an artist who actually could see the talent as well and actually promoted it rather ruthlessly as well, sort of saying, you will be great. And he was, you know, sending out her paintings to some of his collectors and saying, look what my daughter can do as well. No doubt they fiddle around with each other's paintings, but she learned.
Oh, without a doubt, they would have been working on each other's pictures. I mean,
there's a similar style of painting between her father's influence and hers, and also Caravaggio, who her father was friends with. And there's also talk of her being maybe at Caravaggio's studio when she was 10 years old.
I can't imagine her not having met Caravaggio. In my mind's eye, she would have been so involved with the studio, so involved with her father, that for her not to have met Caravaggio seems almost impossible, actually.
Naples at that day must have been thrilling as well. It was the most busy city in the world. You had artists crawling out of every hole, every cellar. And he was picked up. literally on the ground.
Yes.
But after the trial, then it was such a scandal in Rome. It was a big news, like
Yeah.
it is, and it was more for the family name too, because
Yes.
it was a different context back then.
Yeah, for sure.
But
The court
father
case
was worried.
backed by the
Yeah.
father. I mean, we
The
don't
father,
know how
yeah.
much Artemisia had to say about it. I've always imagined that she would have been completely behind her father's desire to seek clarity and justice. I can't imagine that there would be anything else but that desire.
Yeah, and there seemed to be a turning point too when Tassi refused to marry her because he was married prior.
Yeah.
And he was generally probably one of the worst human beings that existed, besides a few others. I'm sure he was in good company, but
Yeah.
he had numerous issues with maybe trying to kill his wife. But he was a famous painter as well, and part of the workshop
Yeah.
for Orazio, and he did mostly landscape backgrounds and things like that, right? And obviously, a reflection of the time, he was found guilty and was supposed to leave Rome, but never did. So, but she had to leave Rome, and they had an arranged marriage for Artemisia in Florence. I believe she left and tried to restore
About a year later, yeah.
what was remaining. But I mean, what a trial and tribulations! But you know, she overcame, and I think that relates to David. You know, she obviously identifies with David as far as someone that overcame the underdog, the all odds.
An impossible.
Impossible.
Yeah, it's an impossible gig that
Yeah.
David kills this.
And there's even a-
huge man.
Yeah,
Goliath.
yeah,
I mean, it's just that's why it's such a story. You know, it's because
It fits so well with her.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
it's one
yeah,
of
exactly.
one of a few of her paintings that is a male.
Yeah.
She mostly does female heroines, and obviously a lot of beheadings, which we also recall Tassi's image in this painting as well. And there's some resemblance to even Artemisia, but it's not a triumphant braggart type expression. It's a mature, stoic, solemn reflection post-battle of victory and her trials, because
He
she had
looks tired.
Yeah,
Can
he
you imagine
looks
coming
tired,
off the
yeah.
battlefield carrying that huge, monstrous head as well?
and the
having won.
sword of
Yeah.
Goliath
Yeah.
is monstrous as well.
Yes,
And
it's
this,
a
did you
deeply
notice, in fact,
mortal one.
did you notice that there was a sling?
Yes, we saw that briefly, or I recognized it briefly, and
And there's
it
also-
looks like it could be part of his hair, but it's actually
No,
a
it's
sling.
sling there, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. He uses the slingshot to,
Yeah.
to hit him in the head.
Right in the
with
middle.
stone.
Yeah.
Then does he then finish him off with the sling itself around
No.
his neck? Or
No,
just
he
the stone does
cuts
the
his head
job?
off.
Cut the head off.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
the
Hence-
sword.
Takes the trophy, yeah. Got it.
Brilliant.
But obviously, other famous artists have done the same epic theme,
Yep.
like Caravaggio. But Caravaggio did a kind of reverse. He put his head as Goliath and was trying for a papal pardon after murdering someone
Yeah.
and being exiled out of Rome. And in that picture, the David also looks like contempt for Goliath, which was actually Caravaggio. So kind of a self-reflection on a totally different way. He identified more with Goliath as opposed to the hero of David that Artemisia and most of the other artists have done. The ultimate victory is that she is now the giant of art. You know,
No,
she's transcended even
Yes.
the gender barriers,
Yeah.
all the trials, the personal trials. And like I like to call it now, instead of old masters, grandmasters.
Yeah,
You know, and I
yeah,
consider
yeah, yeah.
her now
Yeah.
one of the top grandmasters,
Yeah.
regardless of everything that's happened to her.
Has become more important than even her father as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she was highly revered, respected,
Yeah.
massive, successful outpouring from her studio during her life. And then she's sort of forgotten about a bit in the 18th and 19th centuries.
For like 300-400 years, she was
Yeah.
forgotten,
Yeah.
as actually Caravaggio was too, out of favor until
right.
like the
Exactly.
1950s.
Yeah.
Yeah, the high priestess of Italian Baroque. I mean, there she is. Neapolitan Baroque is Artemisia in my mind.
Speaking of history, I'd like to talk a little bit with Simon about some of the findings and X-rays and process that he has for the painting.
Well, one of the frustrating things is that we wanted to try and read the signature. So we put it through all sorts of different types of photography. We can clearly see Artemisia, and then we can see on the next line, it says fake it, which means made it in Latin. And then it's got the date, 16, and two blanks afterwards. So frustrating. And it's frustrating because Artemisia, her way of painting changes from decade to decade or from town to town. She's picking up local traditions of how to paint. For instance, Naples, you can see that this one, for instance, where she's using dark brown, a very, very dark brown background. And when the paint is slightly thin or transparent, you can see that coming through. And they use, the artists, including Caravaggio, use that as a method of making their paintings even more mysterious and dark.
It's a dramatic method of chiaroscuro.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah.
How do you feel this particular painting stands up with her other work in her oeuvre?
I would say this is one of the most dramatic ones because of the subject matter
Yes.
and the personalities that she's captured, but also in Goliath's head as well. There
It's
is a
deeply personal.
Yeah.
You can't read it as anything but deeply personal. Knowing anything about the artist at all, this is
It's a very moving picture. Yeah.
Yeah, and most of her work does show her storytelling ability, which I think separates a lot of the artists over time, the painters, being able to tell a story, because that was prior to motion pictures or photography and everything else. So, and obviously the Counter-Reformation at the time, the church employed a lot of the artists of the time to paint biblical scenes, which is historically what this painting is the David and Goliath.
It became one of the subjects to go to from a lot of the artists at that time, particularly at this time as well.
popular client base. Anybody that's just come good, has made a load of money, can identify themselves with David.
Yeah.
So it's something you'd want on your wall if you were freshly successful.
Yeah.
And there was talk that this might have been commissioned by King Charles I.
Yep.
And he was quite a collector, wasn't he, Daniel?
Yes, he was buying everything. I think he even employed Rubens to go around Europe ripping the heart out of any cultural identity that might exist there and buying it for Charles I. I think he bought basically the entire contents of the Mantuan palaces and sent them off in one big job lot back to London. He was acquisitive in a way that would have made Getty look like a tiny little thing.
Yeah.
He was the 100 times melon.
The 100 times melon, the whole melon.
Right.
We talk about Paul Mellon, as I'm inspired by, and I told Daniel that I'm a collector, but a slice of melon, not a full melon on my budget.
You went higher than that. You said the half melon, and I was impressed.
I wasn't half. I didn't say half. I think I said a slice. But I do have fortunate enough to be able to have a Wooten that was part of the Paul Mellon collection. That,
it's beautiful.
As a few others that I've procured through Daniel that he was able to find of the Wooten. So we got a mini Wooten hall.
Oh yes,
not quite,
so many.
not quite as big as the one at Althorp for the Spencers, but very much loved by me. And we actually had a painting from Charlie Watts's collection too. Maybe talk about that.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, Charlie bought it, funnily enough,
from the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, from Stones. Yeah, Charlie bought it from me, maybe 30 years ago, for his house in Devon. And then sadly, when he passed, he was the best gentleman of London. I mean, he was the most gorgeous man. But when he passed, some of his pictures came back quietly onto the market. And so it was offered to me quietly and went straight to you, So, yeah, he was an amazing man. And it goes perfectly in your 18th century house.
Yes.
So it actually fits beautifully.
Thank you.
But coming back to Charles I. Yes. He was buying everything of quality. He was employing as many great painters as he could. He was desperate. He had Van Dyck living in his court.
Yeah, there was a lot of paintings with Van Dyck of King Charles on the horse that he was kind of a diminutive man, but made him look larger when he was on the horse.
He was very brave.
Very brave. Yeah.
He's a very brave man.
I think there's a story also that the horse was bred slightly smaller as well.
So he looked bigger. Yeah, he was compensating.
We're not sure if it's anachronistic or whether they had a tiny mare.
Right.
But yes, that is the story, definitely. So he was buying everyone, and he could, artist-wise, he sort of effectively tried to buy Rubens, couldn't quite. Rubens had become by this stage so rich that he was an ambassador to various different princes and kings around Europe. There was an art business going on around 1620s, 1630s that was extraordinarily busy. So you had Rubens going around Europe for, let's say, King Charles and also the Archduke, and you had in Italy this huge outpouring of artistic wealth. Really,
and Rubens was also a diplomat, I think, at the time.
100%.
He spoke like 8 languages, and not only was he a great artist, but he was also solving peace throughout Europe in his time. So quite a remarkable man.
Yeah, he was in the court in Madrid, wasn't he?
Yeah.
So what
Yeah.
happened to all the collection of King Charles I after he was
It was auctioned
Auctioned
by people like Dan.
Daniel?
A lot of people
Swan
got
Street?
very rich.
Swan Street had to do that.
Yes.
So that
No, but a lot of it's
spread throughout
returned.
Europe?
Well,
or-
no. A lot of it's returned. It's mostly kept within England.
Okay.
Somewhat.
And actually a lot of the-
is returned to Charles II
Yeah.
on restitution.
As a bit of a favour to
Yeah.
look kindly on me and my family again.
Yeah.
What's it like, Simon, to be here and then somebody brings in a Rembrandt, for instance? I mean, priceless paintings that you get to see right away or are in bad condition and
Yeah.
the attributions all across the board. Tell us a little bit how that happens when they come in.
It's thrilling when somebody comes in. At the moment, we seem to be Constable and Turner seem to be the flavour of this year.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid I don't think I found a constable that is correct. In the last 10 years. I think there have been some Turners. Turner was a special case. When he was traveling, he would make little models and he'd send them back to his clients. And the clients would say, yeah, I like that. Do a 6-foot one.
Oh, yeah.
And then that little model would get bunged up into the attic and stays there for 150 years. And somebody then, Granny, cleans out the attic and finds this, what is this? And so those things come back onto the market.
I have to ask, though, is being a clumsy person, I would be concerned about spilling coffee. Has that ever happened on a Rembrandt or anything?
I tell you, actually, a very funny thing is we were cleaning a Picasso.
Can I just say, you're in the right place for it to happen.
Yeah,
And it'd be okay.
We have very nice
That's a
coffee
good
as well.
point, Daniel. Yeah.
But we were going to clean this Picasso, a 6-foot Picasso. And I said to the owner, there's this big drip all the way down the front of the picture. How did that happen? He said, well, it's always been there as far as I know. And I looked at it and I sort of sniffed it. And I went actually even touched it a bit. And there was a rather nice smell of Arabica coffee. And I thought, coffee? Well, how did that get on there? And so I said, well, why don't we, before we do anything, it's always been photographed like this. Let's just have a look at the oldest photograph. And we looked at a photograph, a black and white photograph of Picasso standing in front of it with a cup of coffee on a shelf behind him.
I love it.
Yeah. And in fact, the drip was there as well.
Yeah.
I love it.
So we didn't clean it. We left it there.
Did you? Yeah.
I mean, of course, this eclipsed 2019 when it first came. And it was the most exciting thing to start working on that.
Yeah.
And Artemisia was...
signature must have just
Yeah.
been a blockbuster
Yeah.
want to have.
And then getting to know this artist as well.
A deathbed memory.
You tell us a little bit about how you go about adding or subtracting, or just curious about that.
It's always a discussion. It's like going to your doctor and you've got a severe something going on in you. Well, we can treat it like this, or we can treat it like this, or we can just leave it alone. And so we have a plan from day one. This is the menu. We're going to go down, and we're going to, in my case, something like this, I would always try to insist, let's go back to the original painting and try and resurrect what the artist was thinking. That's the most exciting thing.
Do you
Not
do a
just-
deep dive into the artist, particular artists like an Artemisia, to go through all the paintings and see all her work?
Yep.
Study?
Yeah. And then we'll try to get technical reports from museums that have worked on her work. If we're lucky enough, they have, and they've made reports, and we can share those reports amongst other people as well. So now I've become a little bit of a place to come with Artemisia. So people turning up with their wheelie bags full of bits of paper, saying that it is an Artemisia when it's clearly not. And we have to sort of talk again. It's a case of having to sit down and talk and say, sorry, it's not.
That's a little bad news day.
Yeah. But there are ways of proving that. There are scientific ways of
it's
proving
sort of an unlikely event that it's going to transform into an Artemisia, surely. If something's very dirty and covered in overpaint. I guess Simon and I both have a sort of educated opinion.
Yes.
But it still comes back to an element of it is educated guesswork.
How soon can you recognize when you see a painting? Obviously, Poppy recognized it from an old photo.
Genius.
That was remarkable.
Genius, right?
Yeah,
and
genius.
it was proven correct.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
that's just unheard of, right?
Yeah.
From
But
a
I
black
mean,
and white photo.
But for you, Daniel, like when you see a painting, do you know immediately, or do you have to
Can I
do you
ask
trust your eye first? Go ahead.
Do you have an instinct that it's a good quality thing?
Yeah, instantly.
Exactly.
Instantly, yeah. That's what I
The trouble is if you have a brilliant painter having a really bad day.
Oh, that's a good point.
Now that throws the cat amongst the pigeons.
Or his cousin has actually got a whole painting as well. Yeah.
Yes. Let me just finish this for him. Yes. No, so I mean, I think most people involved in the art world have to rate themselves as having what we call an eye.
Experience is everything in my point, from my point of view. And then having the confidence to actually to say what you believe as well. And sometimes when I'm confronted with a picture, I was confronted with a picture of a famous Italian ancient family painted by one of the best painters of the time. And it looked ridiculous. It was dirty, filthy. It looked like a dirty piece of velvet. It was just horrible. And I said, really, do we really need to do this? And we did a tiny little test on this picture, and suddenly history started pouring out. And I knew we were in the present.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I could feel the hair on the back of my head come up now. Those moments are priceless for me.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So it probably never gets old either, right? It's
No.
like every day's a new.
Yeah.
Somebody could walk in tomorrow with something
Yeah.
It was something magical.
magical.
Yeah. Yeah.
That has been forgotten. That's the great thing about the great masters, not the old masters. The great masters. I love this new expression of yours because it fits.
I think that's going to fit.
I think it really does. You know, you'll get something that comes in that's been sleepy and forgotten, and actually underneath it is a work of breathtaking genius.
Yeah.
And I think we have this here in terms of it was a breathtakingly beautiful painting before the Artemisia signature came up.
Yes.
But now it's confirmed the narrative has actually superseded the beauty of the painting because it's so jaw-droppingly brilliant.
Yes,
the
the whole thing,
narrative
the
as
whole thing,
well as the painting. It's a double whammy, and it's an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, it was interesting because, you know, this is the first time I've actually seen the painting in person.
Oh my God, of
And,
course.
you know, I talked to Daniel about it, and we did the research, and you actually saw the painting and was at the auction. I'm on the phone, Virginia. I have you on the phone, and then also Christopher Apostle at Sotheby's during the process. You know, you were there, and then tell us a little bit about how it was.
Well, I remember you asking me to go and see it,
Yeah.
and about 15 times. And it was at Sotheby's with Alex Bell.
Yeah.
And the lighting was terrible.
Yeah.
There was flashback all over it, and it was a jaw dropper. An instant. I mean, it is an extraordinary picture. You know, it's everything about it, to my mind, reeks of authenticity.
Actually, when I saw it in Sotheby's, I walked in. They had it on a wall by itself, and it had it brilliantly lit. And
I think
that's when I looked at it again, and I could see what I had done in the past. Or I couldn't see it, but I mean, I could see.
Yeah, you knew.
Yeah, I knew the picture. I knew, what I'd fallen in love with about this artist was there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one particular thing for me, I went to the Paris exhibition and saw all the paintings together of Artemisia, and
some
there was
not
a painting,
Artemisia.
some or not Artemisia. So back to the Attribution issue.
Yeah.
And I called you, and then you referenced some of the, actually Poppy again keeps popping up, and said, you know, it's not Artemisia. And then I looked at the painting and agreed. And I called you and I said, I don't think the Cleopatra is an Artemisia.
Yes, I see my job for you as being like this enormous, great big fishing net just to sift some of the danger rockfish out.
Yeah.
It's not my job to tell you what to like or not like. I'm just so pleased with this picture. We both love it.
Yeah.
Because it's so baroque and roll. It's the most baroque picture you could get.
And then actually, you know, I was again surprised that I was able to get it at auction. I think it came down to 2 bidders. Actually, I was at close to my limit, and then there was a pause, and I was trying to, you know, slow the process as they're pushing me to get my bids in to drive the price up, but I'm kind of slow walking them. And
you bid well.
And then we got it, but then you said
you bid prudently, to use Artemisia's daughter's name.
Yeah, Prudentia. And then, but then after I successfully bid, then you said, I think it has to go back to Simon. For some more work.
Well, I ran into Simon the next day. I mean, it was the weirdest thing. We have these champagne openings for our auctions, and Simon came along because he loves a free drink. I ran into Simon and started talking about the Gentileschi because I knew he'd had a hand in restoring it. And I was like, Simon, there's this incredible picture that Scott's bought, and it just doesn't feel quite resolved in some of the restoration. You know, it's jaw-droppingly brilliant, but it's just slightly off. And Simon looked at me and goes, I don't know why, I just didn't have enough time. I'd love to have another go at it and do it in a way that would give me more time to think. And I think, Simon, you'd learn through the experience of restoring it the first time.
I think answering your question earlier on, what was the process of going through it? I think it was actually unpacking, taking stuff off, getting back to the original picture, knowing what we had to do to make it into a passable picture and a thing that we could.
And you mentioned when we talked too that if I was going to lend it, which I will, to some museums for exhibitions, that you needed more work before they would accept it as exhibition piece. That would help that process too.
That would help it getting into an exhibition, or to be loaned on.
It'd be loaned.
But of course you have to be careful not to do too much as well, because that will suddenly tip it over the other side, and they won't.
Less is more with restoration, wouldn't you say?
Yes, it is.
Always.
Yeah.
No one goes to an exhibition wanting to see a restorer's work.
No.
That's never been done.
So that was the 19th century way of dealing with pictures. Every panel was completely flat and nailed into the frame so it couldn't move.
Did they want it to come back to you, someone, a restorer, and say, "I want it new"? I want it to look like new, right?
All the original,
right?
The original colours. If the colours weren't there, then they would be putting them on. So Devine, who was the big dealer in the early 20th century, buying all the best pictures in war-torn England and Europe, and shunting them off to America. At huge prices. But he was asked once.
He was a master showman.
Yeah. He would sometimes secretly change the colours in the background of a still life painting or something like that, because he knew that the buyer had green wallpaper or something like that.
So he's playing decorator as well.
And also he was then asked, why is the varnish so shiny? He said, well, some of my people like to see themselves as well.
That's great. Yeah. That's great. Is there any questions you'd like to ask Simon, Daniel, about the painting, or
just actually following on,
vice versa?
Yeah, what you were saying about finishing it off, there were areas where the paint had naturally become transparent. And this very, very dark colour was coming through. It was actually spoiling some of the original brushstrokes that would have been thick at one end and feathered out at the other end, but they didn't quite work. And so with a tiny bit of retouching, that's now much more complete. It's not completely complete.
What I recognise from my first viewing of it, I mean, we're talking 3 inches away from her face, was there'd been more retouching, very delicately done on particularly David's face that now isn't there. And actually David's face is probably better for it. Now, better is a strange word to use, but it just feels just right.
I think that the coherence of the artist's brushstrokes now work. And I'm pleased the way it works now. And also it has
these two sleeves, by the way. I keep coming back to. If you look at the colour tones of the sleeve that's towards us, the fore sleeve, and the colour tones of ones behind, that's just welcome to two palettes. It's just perfect.
And yet, if you'd had a palette with the colours on there, you'd probably only got about eight different colours.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Do you feel like you know Artemisia after spending so much time with the painting and studying her? Isn't that?
But she does confuse me.
She does. How does she confuse you?
Because of dating. So not only when you go to an exhibition like in Paris, where you've got a few Artemisias, we think, really? They're not. It gives me a bit of a surprise that they're there. And then you look at them and they confuse you. You confuse the computer inside you. But then you control that, and then you come out and you think, well, painted in 1620, painted in 1630. And then you think, really, was it really 1630? Because it doesn't actually look like any other 1630s. So this is why it's really frustrating that we've got a date there that doesn't quite
I can tell your frustration on that.
And I would really like to know that this really is 1630. Because then we can compare. And what I want to do is to actually, over the next few months, is actually gather images from 1630s that really are then, and to see, we can see the similarity.
With hard knowledge.
Well, this has been fascinating. This episode of Beneath the Varnish, I think we really uncovered, obviously, with fun, the varnish and of this painting. And I feel blessed and will be the custodian for hopefully the rest of my life of this painting.
Good.
And then somebody else will be. But the key for me is that Artemisia will never be forgotten after her rediscovery, which is her as a Grand Master. And regardless of all her trials, regardless of her gender, to me, she is one of the greatest artists that ever lived on this planet and deserves all the accolades she gets. So thank you for adding to that, to her legacy, to her history, and your talents as art historians, as art people and good friends. So thank you very much.
Good luck with the painting.
Yeah.
Thank you.